follow up with holding the public meeting for the community about the project. So we send all that out within 7 days off notice from LNI.
And that notification can also occur when the CDR process is
Correct.
triggered, which could be a by right development, but we also notify for CDR actions as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Hearinng.
Thank you, Council President.
Welcome, sir.
Now, I hope you're not out in anybody's office now. Want to like a response. All right. I'm sure we would never do that. So, got a few other questions here. And you state that in the district plans that they're measured by a number of bills prepared for properties identified for zoning changes. Both good measures. All right. Is there data captured that measures the public participation in the development and approval of these plans?
We do measure participation in our civic outreach meetings, our public meetings for regarding a district plan. We also maintain a Facebook site, Twitter account, and notify and count the number of participants in those kind of social media discussions. We also monitor hits to our website for certain issues. So we use all of those things as a measure of our ability to reach out to the public regarding any particular issue.
Well, you know, and I'm just going to state this for the record, and I know for a fact I'm going to speak of my district, all right? Although we are increasingly becoming a younger, hipper city, we're still a little behind some of the social media communication and website visits and things like that. So when you take a look at each district is different, you know, when it comes to their their participatory in that kind of technology. So how do we? So you have a meeting, and the district council person is notified.
Yeah, we don't use electronic media exclusively. We still do things the old-fashioned way, working with block captains to leaflet areas when we're holding a public meeting.
Because so that's how you're going to get the encouragement and support of the district council person by having that kind of that
Sure.
social engagement, you know, face to face, in addition to, you know, the social media, you know, outreach and website.
Right.
Okay.
We also have a series of, again, electronic media, but email lists. So, you know, when we prepare an agenda for a city planning commission meeting, that agenda is blasted out to, I don't know, several thousand email accounts that, you know, that we have on our system. When we prepare an agenda for a public CDR meeting, that information is blasted out. When we schedule a public meeting for any district plan, that information is also blasted out. So we're using our all means available to make that, you know, to make information known about the kinds of things that we're doing.
Good, and I agree with that. I mean, and you know, I'm glad to hear that. And last on the questions with the RCOs, is there somebody in the oversight to make sure that everybody is in compliance, not just the RCOs, but the applicant, all right, for when it becomes time to go in front of the ZBA? Do you coordinate with the ZBA in making sure that, you know, everybody is in good standing and have completed the required information in meetings and things like that?
We are monitoring that. Our staff is monitoring that. I'm not sure at the ZBA that has happened in each and every occasion. I know for CDR meetings that the required RCO meetings must occur before we can even hold a CDR meeting.
Correct.
That in fact happened.
So it stopped before it gets to...
Yes.
All right,
Yes,
so-
and in fact...
So the communities, and and I've been through this process, so I know, all right? But I just want to hear it again. All right, so the communities have their say, their input, and their opportunities, and then you sign off it before it even gets to the ZBA, is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
or CDR?
for CDR, I can speak specifically about CDR because I'm personally involved in those kind of meetings. So yesterday there was a public CDR meeting involving the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia proposal for 700 Schuylkill Avenue. We requested in advance of the CDR meeting from the 3 RCOs that were involved letters stating that they had in fact met with Children's Hospital before we held the public meeting yesterday. There are far more ZBA hearings, and the rule of thumb is that the ZBA should not be holding a hearing on a zoning refusal unless the developer has met with the RCO and that the RCO has documented
So
that.
where's the checks and balances there? I mean, so if people aren't in compliance, anybody, I don't care who it is, all right, if they're not in compliance by the time it gets to the ZBA, because, we're doing this for all the right reasons. So if it comes in front of the ZBA, is the ZBA instructed, and it should be by law, it's a law, the
Right.
ZBA shouldn't be hearing any variances or any cases, whatsoever relevant to zoning without all parties involved meeting their requirements. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is the requirement, and my understanding from speaking to staff commission staff who staffs the RCO meetings, that when it becomes known that a developer has not met with an RCO, that case will be continued until that meeting occurs. Now, I'm not sure.
But we don't oversee the ZBA, so that's part of the capacity issues. We weigh in on it, but that is one of our challenges in making sure that does happen. But it is our understanding that the ZBA board will not hear a case.
Oh, I'm sure they would abide by the law, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. With that, no one else is teed up, other than Councilman Hearinng.
I'll be brief.
No matter how long it takes.
No matter how long, I heard that before. I've heard that before. Okay, so
Yeah,
in the
we do.
recommendations from the zoning board, in the one-year review, I don't know, is this the right panel for that?
Yes.
Or would that be our deputy mayor?
Certainly the deputy mayor can answer the questions too, but the city planning commission prepared the one-year report that was transmitted to city council in August.
4 simple questions.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm gonna read off a quote and then ask my question. All right, and this is just from the recommendations from the one-year review. There is uncertainty as how much weight ZBA gives to citizens and RCO support or opposition to individual variance requests and a desire to understand the basis of ZBA decisions. End of quote. All right, so my question is, I've heard from a lot of constituents in the district and quite frankly throughout the city that the ZBA on some occasions, not all occasions, on some occasions has been unresponsive to the community's concerns. Does the ZBA provide decision information to the Planning Commission? And if not, why? And if so, if we have that decision-making information, can we have that publicly available or at least upon request?
You want Alan to answer?
You need a lawyer?
We're just consulting here a little bit. I believe that we can monitor, that we have the ability to monitor that, but I'm not sure of the statistics, and I think that's probably something that we would have to get back to you on.
Okay. I appreciate if you can provide it to the chair.
Will do.
And I will forward these last couple of questions over to you, just, for the record. Quote from the recommendations again, coordinate with L&I to create a data tracking system for variances and special exceptions. The system should, at a minimum, provide the ability to track the number of variances and special exceptions requested by each appeal to the ZBA and zoning code provision, causing each variance or special exception. Is this data recorded? Is it publicly available? And is it being tracked?
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
It is a work in progress. We are tracking it. I don't believe that it's publicly available in the sense that we're not posting that on our website on a regular basis, but we are tracking it, and we have discussed in-house the need to build a more robust database that would allow us to do more analysis of that data.
We're trying to work with OIT to set up such a system that would allow us to have that kind of data analysis happen. Currently,
Data that you can
Like we can
analyze
separate.
and
Yes.
communicate with the ZBA?
Special
Do you
exceptions.
coordinate now through, or are you on the same database, like
Hanson,
Hanson, so you can communicate with each other electronically?
to
Like,
some degree.
for data-wise, or?
I mean, we do have access to the Hansen system, and the new Project Eclipse database will be a more robust system. We do coordinate with L&I and the ZBA, but the database that we use currently to track variance requests and special exceptions requests, I think, are internal to the City Planning Commission at this point.
Okay, could Eclipse be enhanced to track that data? Is that the data system, or are we looking for a?
Yeah, that's the new-
If you don't have an answer, don't, I mean, that's
We'll have
fine.
to-
Let us double check on that and get
Okay,
back to you.
in 37 positions, is that correct, that you're looking to fill?
Yes.
All right, I missed the very beginning of it, so I don't know what those positions are, but you're actively working to try to fill those positions that's been
No,
budgeted?
All of our funded positions, I mean, the data that was provided to you, I think, was as of the end of the calendar year. So we had 5 open positions. We've been working to fill those positions, four of which have been filled, and I believe that we just made a job offer for the 5th. That was accepted late last night via email. So all of those positions are now filled.
So with
We're
the,
37.
37.
so with the uptick of construction and development, as you can see from the first quarter, and permits that are being pulled, in planning, so you know what's coming. And this is my last question from the zoning recommendation. Quote, the Office of Deputy Mayor and Economic Development will explore how to secure resources to create an additional staff position with the board's administration unit, who is fully dedicated to the ZBA admin. Has this position been filled? Was that the one last night? I'm joking here.
In our fiscal
Has that,
Yeah, in our fiscal 2015, we did not receive any additional positions. But we're working on the side with L&I to see if we can't develop an arrangement whereby we would have a dedicated staffer who could deal with all issues related to RCOs and RCO notification.
and I think that's, it's almost critical to making sure that we ensure compliance on both the RCOs and the developer compliance, right? Because that's a law.
Yes,
And I think it's
we
necessary
agree.
from a process standpoint to make it easier for everybody on your end and in the community, so I'm in favor of that. And with that, Council President, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you all very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Commerce Department. NOEO. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And it is afternoon.
Here, you want to summarize your testimony?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have Council President, a very brief opening statement, and then we get right into questions.
Thank you.
One statement is that I always seem to pick the short seat. I've got to do better at this. No, it's all right. Good morning, Council President and members of the Council. I'm Alan Greenberger, Deputy Mayor for Economic Development and Director of Commerce. Joining me today are a number of our senior staff, Dwayne Bum, our Senior Deputy Director of Commerce, Karen Fagley, our relatively new Deputy Director of Commerce, Linda House, Director of Finance and Administration, Angela Dowd-Burton, our Executive Director of OEO, and various other senior commerce staff. Department of Commerce is submitting a fiscal year 2015 operating budget request of over $100 million, but only of which $19 million relates to the general fund, and most of that relates to convention center pass-through money. So in the end, the commerce budget is about, all told, about $3.5 million. The rest of it is pass-through. First, let me thank members of City Council with whom we work every day to attract businesses and create jobs in the city. We have shared short profiles of the collective work we've done in the last year with each of the council district, with each council district, with the district members, and are working on a broader piece highlighting economic development achievements across the city. And we will take that compilation of the 10 district summaries and put them together in one piece and make them available to all 17 council members in the next week or two. Thanks to the partnership between the administration and the council and our work with other organizations such as PIDC, the Chamber, Select Greater Philadelphia, and the Commonwealth, Philadelphia continues to bounce back from the effects of the recession. A few statistics. There are more jobs in Philadelphia in 2013 than any year since 2003. Specifically, there were 666,000 jobs in the city of Philadelphia. There were more Philadelphians employed in January 2014, which is when the latest data is available, than in any January since 2009, 589,000 employed Philadelphians. There are also fewer Philadelphians unemployed in January than any January since 2008, specifically 57,000 unemployed Philadelphians. The unemployment rate is 8.9%, which is too high, but it is also 3 percentage points lower than when I testified before this body in last year's budget hearing. And I don't say all of this to suggest that there's a victory lap to be taken here, but it does suggest that the picture is improving. Before taking questions, I'd like to share a few highlights with you from the year. Department of Commerce has attracted or retained almost 30 companies in fiscal year 2014 to date. In terms of real estate development, approximately $7.5 billion in construction projects have either been completed since January 2013, are currently under construction, or are planned in the near future. And you should think of that as a 6-year window. The Office of Economic Opportunity continues to increase minority participation in city contracts, and as a result will increase the goal for minority, women, and disabled-owned business participation in the city contracts to 30% in fiscal year 2015 from its current goal of 25%. The Office of Neighborhood Economic Development is expanding the support which it provides to commercial corridors and small businesses. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later during the hearing. Working in close partnership with Councilman Bobby Hearinng, the Department of Commerce convened a range of internal and external partners through the Manufacturing Task Force to develop a manufacturing growth strategy for Philadelphia. One of the recommendations of the report, the creation of an Office of Manufacturing and Industry within city government, was recently announced by the mayor during his budget address, and today I'm happy to announce that we have appointed Michael Cooper, who is currently at PIDC but will be coming over to Commerce to serve as the director of this new office. And we continue to be aggressive in our support of startups, pursuit of international investment, and our efforts to streamline the development process and make it easier to get projects done in the city. And with that, we'll take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions. You talked about the 30 companies that have you retracted or retained, creating or retaining of almost 12,000 jobs. Can you describe in more detail exactly what you've done to do that, what your role as the Commerce Department was to maintain or create those new jobs?
Sure.
And the categories of those jobs, temporary, permanent. And you know what, actually some of this you can just kind of send, because I'm going to ask you for some specific figures, which I'm sure you may not have.
I have a few, but I'll bring some
You can
specific
forward to
figures in as I know them, at least as I have them written down, but I'm also happy to provide council with a list of these attractions. So let's just start on the retain portion. We're aware of businesses whose leases are either up or are contemplating growth. They come to us sometimes directly into Commerce, sometimes they come through PIDC, sometimes they even come through Select Greater Philadelphia. And we begin discussions with them about their longer-term plans. We often do that jointly, particularly with PIDC, and talk about how we might best position the city to retain them. In many cases, there's also job growth attached, and some examples of that would be FMC, Beneficial Bank, are two of the most prominent ones from last year, who were being actively courted by other states, who in some cases, particularly in the case of New Jersey, are offering massive tax credit arrangements. And so basically we have to get in there and make the case for why staying in Philadelphia is worthwhile. I will tell you that an enormous amount of the reason that these businesses choose to stay is because of the access to talent, new employees, particularly as some of their staff ages out of their companies. And I think the access to the rest of the world, both through the airport and up and down the East Coast. This turns out to be very meaningful to a lot of companies. It certainly had to do with why both those companies stayed. And they were also, we do this sort of, I wouldn't say jointly, but we sort of do it in parallel in the case, for instance, of FMC. Well, actually, both of them, FMC and Beneficial, landlords who are interested in providing them new space. And so we're in coordination on that. On the attraction front, it really ranges across, and some of those companies, by the way, also have planned growth, and we're aware of that and do our best to help incentivize it, work with the state when RACP money is involved, work on low-interest loans to the extent that those are part of the story as well, or can be part of the story. So we do what we can with the limited tools that we have. On the new businesses, they fall into a lot of different categories, and I'll try to quickly summarize what some of them are and what our efforts are in them. Some of them are, again, new companies that we become aware of through the network of connections we have, and I'll give you a good example, Exalta Coating Systems, a new company that purchased the old DuPont coating systems, paint, decided that it needed to reposition itself outside of the DuPont sort of node in Delaware, and suggested that being in Philadelphia, particularly for their global headquarters, was going to be an important thing to them. They also were aware, and we certainly emphasize this point with them too, that there is a growing node of chemical and petroleum-related businesses in the city of Philadelphia, and they wanted to be part of that. So we were able to attract them into the city with over 100 new and extremely high-paying jobs, which serves one of the critical outcomes of what we do, which is to increase the tax base. The most critical outcome being the expansion of the job base in the city, particularly for Philadelphians. Other instances are more, you might say, sector-related. There's an enormous amount of development that's going on amongst our institutions. I think just this morning there may have been an article about CHOP's proposals for the east side of the Schuylkill. They're working through a process. That's probably a $2+ billion investment that is just part of who they are and who they've become, which of course is spectacular, and everybody of course knows about Comcast.
Excuse me, not forgetting that. So are you suggesting that the Commerce Department played a role in that decision?
We didn't play a role in the decision for CHOP to move, to expand. No, that's their decision. We played a role and continue to play a role in helping them get through a regulatory process to get that project done. So our role sometimes is at the front end, and sometimes it's more at the regulatory end. I can give you an example of a more front-end related one, and that's our efforts in what's sometimes referred to as the technology and startup community. As you know, Council President, we've done a fair bit of work through an operation we call Startup PHL to advocate for, provide seed funding for, and provide some limited grant money to expand this environment of startup businesses. People think that that's all about technology businesses, and that's certainly part of it. And a lot of those businesses have grown dramatically in Philadelphia over the last 4 years. But this is specifically targeted to create a startup culture that becomes known throughout the United States and hopefully throughout the world, because that's how we're going to attract more of these businesses, and also how we're going to retain some of the young people who have great ideas and then frequently in the past have gone to other cities in pursuit of those business opportunities.
Okay. Can you forward a list of the 30 companies?
Sure.
And if at all possible, categorize which ones were actually created and in terms of the jobs, or the 12,000 jobs, and which ones were retained?
Happy to.
Yep, so.
Yeah. Could I also just, oh, I'm sorry, keep going.
And if at all possible, the geographical area where those companies are.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Which, if I could take one other moment to also mention on my list, we're also, at the same time all this is going on, the fact is that the two-thirds of the resources of the Commerce Department are devoted to neighborhood commercial corridors, small business that exist throughout the city, including some manufacturing and technology businesses that choose not to be in Center City for one reason or another.
Okay. If you could just forward
Anyway,
that.
that'll all be on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, okay?
Thank you. You also state in your testimony on page 3, real estate development since January 2013, $7.5 billion in construction. And if you can also, and you don't have to do it now, just explain Commerce's role in that and where that particular real estate development took place geographically. If you could just give me a map of the city.
Sure,
Tell me
happy
where
to
that
do, happy to do that.
All right. And the time frame, because you talked about a 6-year window.
Yeah, that's about a 6-year window from
Sometime.
when construction really started to pick up again in 2011 up to things that will most likely be completed somewhere in the vicinity of 2017. So that's a 6-year outlook
Okay. Yeah.
of things that we know and believe have either happened or we are quite sure will happen.
Okay. And also, again, in your testimony on page 5, you talked about $650,000 proposed to fund approximately 17 organizations to hire staff to clean sidewalks on neighborhood corridors.
Mm-hmm.
One, is there currently an appropriation for that in fiscal 14, or is this new money?
This is money that typically flows through the system from the federal side, from CDBG and other grant sources. And yes, as far as we know, it is in FY15 as well.
So it's not new money?
No, this is yearly money that is flowing to us on the federal side.
Okay, I'm just asking,
you'll
see it
see
here, it looks like the period.
Okay, you'll see it in the Con Plan 40 testimony as
It
well.
was in the last comp plan.
It was in the last one, and it's going to be new monies
So it's
in the
not
next one.
expanded. All right, and if you can talk to me about the selection process. I asked that question because I was at a meeting, and you know, when you go to these community meetings and people had commercial corridors,
Yeah.
and make sure our funding is in place for next year.
Yeah.
You know how it goes. Well, maybe you
Do
don't.
you want me to say something about that?
You can say it, or you can forward it to us. Or
Okay. I mean, all I'll tell you just briefly is that there are selection committees that are formed around each of these competitive grant processes to evaluate proposals that are put in. They're scored, graded. We go over them in detail, and, you know, inevitably some proposals are better than others, and we certainly look at things like past performance, how well the communities are doing with the money, how effectively they're using it, and try to make determinations about how to parse this money. We don't have enough to do everybody.
Is there a selection? I mean, is there an application process?
There is an application process, and proposals are taken in under Karen Fagley's direction, and then these committees are put together to review the applications.
And those committees are from what, Commerce or
Those are
Commerce Department?
Those are, there's Karen, internal, yes?
Some Commerce people and usually some representatives from other departments as well.
Okay.
depending on what the subject is.
Yeah, if you could just give me a list of
Sure.
the selection committee.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it for me right now, and Chair recognizes Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Greenberger.
Good afternoon.
You oversee the Office of Economic Opportunity, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
On paper or for real?
The Office of Economic Opportunity lives within the Department of Commerce.
So are you actively involved?
I am.
Okay. I want to have a discussion today with hopes that we can resolve one very serious issue
Mhm.
and resolve as much as possible. I want the discussion to be between you and I. But this issue has to be resolved before the release of the disparity study
Mhm.
and the setting of annual participation goals. I will start by saying, before I run through my list of questions, that to have set a goal for fiscal year 15 before the annual disparity study is against the law. That's how I'll start.
Mhm.
The first question is, your testimony states that the administration is increasing the DBA participation goal from 25% to 30%. Are you familiar with the laws regarding the setting of participation goals?
I'm sorry, am I familiar with the laws?
With the laws regarding the setting of participation goals?
Probably not in the detail that you're about to bring up, so please continue.
So do you know what's in the charter?
I know that there's a disparity study every year that sets what the baseline goal is.
You're not really familiar with what's in the charter.
I can't tell you in detail.
Okay, do you know what's in the code?
Again, I cannot tell you, I can't recite that in detail for you.
Do you know that the setting the 25% goal was legal?
I believe it was, it came from the disparity study.
Okay. And it represents 25% of what?
It represents the difference between the availability of funds and the level of participation within a given set of areas.
Okay. And what does the 30% goal represent?
30% is an aspirational goal to try to continually increase the participation rate that we are getting. We have no surety that we can get there.
It is 30% of what?
It is 30% of the it's 30% of the procurement that the city does for which we have for which there is availability.
Is the 30% goal 30% the same base as
Yeah.
the base that was where 25% goal was set?
I don't believe it is. I know that you had brought this up at the Comcast hearing. I believe that you're right about the math, although there's some subtlety behind it that I'd be happy to go over with you in detail.
Okay. It represents the exclusion of $150 million in contracts.
That's right. It excludes things for which there's no availability.
Is that legal?
We believe it is because there's no availability. We don't know what else we can do, like buying electricity.
Okay. Who has the legal authority to define the categories of contracts in the disparity study and participation goals?
Well, ultimately, we work on a basis of our beliefs about what the law says, and we have to get that confirmed by the law department.
But my question is, who has the legal authority to define the categories of contracts in the disparity study and participation goals?
I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer the question. I don't know.
Okay, because you don't know what's in the charter and what's in the code.
I can't.
Council
I'm being straight with you about what it's in my head.
I understand.
Yeah.
Council has that authority.
Okay.
So who gave the authority to exclude contracts?
Well, based on what you said, I imagine council did.
We did not.
Okay.
And there's nothing within the charter or the code that gives you that authority to exclude contracts. What percentage of contracts did you exclude to measure the overall annual participation rate?
I think the exclusion was about 20% of the whole.
Yes, correct. What percentage of contracts did you exclude from the managing director's office?
I don't know. Do you know that one, Angela? I'm sorry, I don't know that one off the top of my head.
97.5%. What percentage of contracts did you exclude in the Department of Human Services?
I don't have that information in front of me, but if you give us a few minutes.
81%. You
Okay.
excluded $52 million worth of contracts in the managing director's office. You excluded $47 million worth of contracts in the Department of Human Services. What's the law regarding the setting of participation goals for nonprofits?
You want to try that? There is, excuse me, we have not set goals for them because of the complexity of figuring out ownership issues. Now okay, go ahead.
Bill 060855A. Under the requirements of what you're supposed to do, city contract participation goals for DBEs and nonprofit city contracts related to for-profit subcontract opportunities. That's the law from '06. Before this administration, you can't, as an administration, arbitrarily come in and change the rules when they're the law. So you're supposed to be setting goals for nonprofits. Is that correct?
Excuse me? Ms. Dalberton is saying it is not in the executive order.
The executive order is not law.
I hear you, and I'm happy to revisit
let me
this with you and
explain
understand this
something
better.
to you. This is very much about what is law and what's not law. What's the law with regard to submitting an up-to-date DB directive to City Council?
I'm sorry.
So,
Could you repeat that, please?
Mr. Greenberger, what's the law?
I don't know what the law is off the top of my
Okay.
head.
That's also within that same ordinance. There's supposed to be an up-to-date directory
Okay.
45 days before the fiscal year. Lastly, I'm going to try to make this real simple. When I amend the law, which I'm going to do, to explicitly require you to count all contracts for goal setting, will you abide by the law?
Certainly we intend to, yes.
If not, I will sue you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Good. As a follow-up to the question regarding nonprofits, I clearly remember at least 4 years ago raising the question on how were we tracking and holding nonprofits accountable that receive city dollars. What were we doing with regards to MBE, WBE procurement on their end? And I was under the impression that a task force had been organized to begin to look at that more closely so that we can help nonprofits understand if you want to do business with the city, then you have to do it in a way that helps MBE, WBEs just in terms of leveling the playing field. So update where we are on that task force.
Good morning, Councilman Blondell Reynolds Brown. My name is Angela Dowd-Burton. I am Executive Director of the Office of Economic Opportunity. So you're absolutely right. 4 years ago, we were looking at the nonprofit portfolio. We realized while we spent $1 billion a year on the for-profit side of our investment, we're actually spending $2 billion a year with nonprofits. We pulled together the top 100 nonprofits, which represented about 85% of that $2 billion, and talked to them about the specifics of supplier diversity programs and also to find out where they were. We pulled the group together. We introduced them in a second meeting to about 70 or 80 for-profit companies that they could look at. These are minority and women-owned businesses who were successful in the marketplace and who could provide them with the products and services that they would typically buy in spite of their narrow margins as nonprofits. We continue to work with nonprofits, and the Office of Health and the Deputy Mayor of Health has been instrumental in helping us collect data, and as well as the Managing Director's Office and Finance, collect data on the board composition of these companies and the workforce composition. I think you may be aware of one of the largest nonprofits we do business with, Vision Quest,
Yes.
who works for Human Services, even relocated their operations inside the city of Philadelphia and actually employ 80% of their workers are city residents now. And a majority of them are women, a majority of them are African American. So there are different ways that we've tried to identify supplier diversity programs and other innovative opportunities for engaging the workforce here in the city.
And what measures are in place to look at trends to see if those task force meetings are amounting to real outcomes in terms of deepening their involvement with MBE, WBEs?
So I think we're going to affect the third year of collecting board data. Each year, the contracts that we have in place, we are requiring...
Councilman Good?
Madam Chair, I thought you were asking about whether there were goals set for nonprofits.
Yes, that too.
Okay.
Okay, so we do not have participation goals that we set for nonprofits at this time.
Forgive me, Mr.
The law.
And so with that, and the restatement that it is the law, where and when do nonprofits understand that this is the new order of the day when it comes to MBE, WBE participation? How do we, how can that happen? How should that happen?
Well, I
Because
think...
it's 4 years later now.
Absolutely. I think this law from 2006 is really the first time I'm hearing about it, and I apologize for that oversight. It is certainly information that I would have benefited from 4 years ago, but after this meeting, we will clearly explore the content of this
Mr.
law.
Councilman Good?
That section of the code is included in executive order.
Councilman, I have a copy of the executive order.
Then you should read it because that section of the code is included in executive order.
I read the executive order this morning, 0312. It's not there.
Of the code is included in executive order.
I will
So
certainly
clearly we're
look
reading
again.
from-
If you have a copy
I
of
will
executive order,
certainly-
if you have a copy of executive order, I can show it to you right now.
I will certainly look at the executive order again.
Or you can give it to
but-
me and I can show it to you right now.
Okay. But the intent absolutely is to look at what the legal provisions are and to abide by them, and we will certainly engage the nonprofit community in making sure that they are in compliance.
So we've heard of there's a look-see at board composition. That's encouraging. We've
Yes.
heard that there's a look-see at workforce composition, since too many of us in here care about, number one, Philadelphia-based, Philadelphia area residents.
Correct.
When it comes to doing businesses with caterers and printers and other vendors and the like, that's where we need to see some movement. And it has been stipulated, it's the law.
And we will certainly give our due diligence to that and make every effort to comply.
This task group meets how often?
Actually, we don't have a regular meeting. We meet at least twice a year. We meet quarterly in the Mayor's Economic Opportunity Cabinet to discuss nonprofits. But in general, I meet with Deputy Mayor Don Swartz at least twice a year on nonprofits.
And so be advised that when I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 departments that I'm looking at specifically as it relates to Councilman Good's line of questioning. And so when DHS comes to us and and may not be able to inform us how far they move the needle with regards to this issue, where does the responsibility lie?
In terms of compliance?
Yes.
The operating department and the Office of Economic Opportunity collaborate very closely with regard to compliance matters. And so we will work with them and their supplier or their provider to move the needle as it relates to, number one, making sure that supplier diversity programs have been established. That
Okay.
has been the game plan
The fact
for
that
the
they've been
last 4
established
years.
at these nonprofits would be a beginning.
Exactly. And that we worked on 4 years ago, 3.5. Now we're tracking what is the growth rate based on that baseline.
And that's where we need to see.
We will be consolidating that information.
That's where we need to see
this
the
year.
data. So this issue will never go away, and it
it
shouldn't
should
go
not.
away in a city
That's
that
correct.
looks like ours.
That's absolutely right.
Point of information.
Councilman Good?
Madam Chair, in the executive order, actually in the definition of the Office of Economic Opportunity, OEO, it says an agency within the Commerce Department created to administer a comprehensive citywide approach for advancing economic opportunities for MW, DSBEs, and promoting employment opportunities for diverse workers seeking jobs in the local economy. OAO administers this order in Chapter 17-1600 of the Philadelphia Code, which is performs and responsibilities created by Section 17-1500 of the Philadelphia Code. And Section 17-1500 of the Code is what was created by the bill in 2006.
So we now have clarity on that. Agreed?
Yes, we will absolutely go back to the Philadelphia Code.
Very well. Before we move to Councilman O, to our Secretary of Commerce, what happens in referencing back to the federal granting bidding opportunities? What happens with those communities that are not as sophisticated in pursuing and completing bid contracting opportunities, but typically tend to be communities where that opportunity is most needed?
Well, first of all, Councilwoman, let me say that actually many of the communities in which that need is strongest are well organized and
Okay.
they are competitive. And if you need, I can go through a list of some of those, particularly some of those commercial corridors. But to the extent that they are not as well organized, something that we very much do and want to do, particularly with council help, is to get into these places and help them get organized. And for instance, she's here. Councilwoman Bass knows, for example, there have been a lot of competing organizations over the years in places like Germantown. And one of the things that Councilwoman's been very helpful with is trying to get that community focused and unified, because there's no question in our minds that whatever limited grant money is available always works best when there is a very strong partner and there's reasonable unity in the community about what they're supposed to do. So we work with business associations, community development corporations, bids to the extent that they exist. Those are pretty well organized already.
Sure.
And sometimes random interest groups attempting to get them organized, because that is going to put them in the most competitive situation. And I would admit that in some neighborhoods it's not easy.
It isn't. The footnote I would add, having served on the, it wasn't a task force, but the group that dealt with looking at applications around the cultural corridors, proposals, awards that went out 5-6 years ago, was having a council member at the table to be a part of that conversation and dialogue had some merit. And so I would ask you to please consider resuming that particular practice, because we know that if that particular council member has an interest in that issue, as it was for me, arts and culture, also come with a perspective that oftentimes, but for a member being at that table, might get overlooked.
I agree with you, and actually a great example of what you're saying, because I was just looking over here at Councilwoman Blackwell, is the activity that's happened on 52nd Street. None of that would have been possible without a very high level of cooperation between Councilwoman's office and Commerce, because it's tough. It's a tough situation. It's competing interests.
It's tough, competing interests, but members are on the front line,
right,
and seeing those issues up close and personal.
Right, and things got
that
done
has
there
value.
with a lot of sustained effort from both sides.
Indeed.
So, to take your point completely.
Indeed. Okay, then let's go to Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. Good morning, Deputy Mayor.
Morning, or afternoon.
Good afternoon. Seems like morning. I want to just ask a couple of questions before I get to my main line of questions, but I just was wondering, in looking at your testimony, I see that you have 40 members of your staff, and it says 1 Asian American, but when I look at the languages, there are 6 Asian languages and 1 Asian American. I could have...
I wonder if something's wrong with that information, because I can think of 3 right off the top of my head.
Me too. Yeah, me too. So
and I'm not trying to do a census. They're just bubbling up here.
I know there's more than one, and I would just wonder if at some point in time, if this could be updated. And I just wonder, is this voluntarily created? Do people kind of volunteer when they fill out these statistics?
Yeah, we ask people whether they have any proficiency in other languages. We also work with VISTA workers who actually come to us with language proficiency, but that census, and I apologize if it's got some piece of bad information in there, is really voluntary so that we at least know who in our organization we can rely on if needed.
Yeah,
And it's needed in many neighborhoods.
right. So I do appreciate that, and I would just like to ensure that everybody understands that these demographic, they are very important to us, and if there are 3 or 4 or 2, we'd really like to know so that when we look at how the department is comprised demographically, we do know how many women and various types of other ethnicities and nationalities are represented.
Dwayne Bum is reminding me that some of that discrepancy has to do with, because we have a somewhat complex employment structure in commerce. Some of that has to do with which employees are actually funded through commerce and the general fund, which employees are funded through the PIDC side, who are our permanent employees, and so it may be missing some of the folks on the PIDC side who, in fact, I can think of a couple right now.
Yes, and I do understand that and appreciate that. So I do know.
But I'll get you a complete list just on the whole census of the place.
Right. Well, that would be great, and I do appreciate that explanation. The other question that I had, kind of preliminary, is on line 517, there is Commerce Department Economic Development contribution. There's $500,000 for other government agencies and nonprofit organizations for economic development. Yeah. Is that any one organization, or is that a multiple of
the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation. It's a pass-through to them.
Okay. So that's a $500,000 pass-through. Does the Commerce Department make a contribution to Select Greater Philadelphia, or is that just from some other fund?
Through the PIDC side, yes, we do. We support them.
Okay. So what is the amount annually that the Commerce Department passes through to Select Greater Philadelphia through PIDC?
I think it's $200,000 a year, and we have a kind of 2-year agreement with them, which is now, I think, up for renewal this June.
So it's a total of $400,000 over the 2 years?
Over 2 years, correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so, and if you don't know anything off the top of your head, I'd be happy if you just tell me. I'll get that to the chair and,
okay.
Okay. So, looking at the international efforts, which I appreciate, and would like to at least anecdotally point out that, the Hyundai Rotem train manufacturer in South Philadelphia has directly employed at times over 300 people and indirectly supports 5,000 Pennsylvania workers, and in its last set of contracts paid out over $150 million to businesses here in and around Philadelphia primarily. So, whenever we talk about new money, the international effort is very critical, as you know, and we're always looking for new money, being we're always short on money, and new taxes and whatnot. So I understand that the mayor has gone on 5 international trips: Brazil, China, the UK, Israel, and Africa. To your knowledge, is that correct?
And if you want to include the recent trip to Rome, I guess that would be 6.
Okay, 6 then. Thank you very much.
For the Pope, but nevertheless, it was a trip.
Okay, no, it's all important to categorize. Yeah. So the trip to Rome was particularly about the Pope's visit to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Brazil, I understand, was a green conference.
Brazil and I think the South African trip were both green conferences.
Okay. And the China trip was the mayor's conference.
The China trip was the mayor's conference, although we packaged into it then some opportunities for some agreements and some business expansion. Okay. The UK and the Israel trip were, you might think of as kind of pure trade mission trips.
Okay. How do I find out how much was spent on these visits? What did it cost?
I could get you the information if you like.
Okay. Can I find it in the budget? Because I couldn't find it in the budget.
No, because they generally are not funded through the general fund. They're funded by other parties because we think that that's the appropriate thing. So for instance, Select, since you brought it up before,
Right.
is one of the major funders of some of these trips.
Right. So I understand that we give Select $400,000. They are paying for these trips, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's kind of like we're funding them, they're funding us.
Well, they're also funded by a lot of other organizations, so it's a big blended pot of money. But we do, so that's it. It's, yes, we give them $400,000. They're funding some of these trips. We insist on that kind of participation from them, but they also have a much larger funding base than that through membership.
Yes, and I know they market for the region. So that's part of my question. In other words, I could not find out how much the cost of the trips were because I don't know how much Select Greater Philadelphia. I could ask them. I'm sure they'd provide it, but
We'll get it for you.
yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So,
No, could I please seize the moment and do a follow-up to that very
sure,
question?
yes.
So it's too early to tell what the return on investment is from this year's efforts. Can you speak to trips maybe over the past 4 years and what the return on investment has been in terms of new, hard employment or industry opportunities for the
Sure.
city?
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman O.
Thank you.
And I think the answer, Councilwoman, is that there weren't that many trips until recently, so there's not a lot of data to sort of go on here. But I can tell you the results of the trip that we did to the UK and Israel, at least thus far. That trip was in early November, or middle of November, I guess. And there's two sides to the story. There's one is that businesses from Philadelphia came with us and expanded their networking and their reach into foreign markets. And those are ongoing conversations they're having with possible sales in foreign countries. The other side of it is that, and I personally probably had about 8 of these meetings with companies from the UK and from Israel who are looking for some kind of base of operations in North America. Our big pitch is you need to be in Philadelphia for a variety of reasons. And now they, starting at the end of January into February, are now starting to visit us, in a certain sense, kick the tires themselves and see what's up. And this is all with the goal of attracting them to start an operation here in Philadelphia, much like we did with the Mark Group, which was an English company that we were able to attract here for the very same purpose 3 years ago.
So specifically with regards to the UK effort, the story read that they would be breaking ground early 2014. What's the timeline or anticipated timeline now for the Guardian MPS?
The story that who was going to
Guardian, well, the story that spoke to Mayor Nutter, Guardian MPS announced plans to locate headquarters in Philadelphia. That was November 2013. The article indicated that the expectation was that ground would be broken
I
April
apologize.
2014.
I'm going to have to just do a little more homework on that and get back to you on it because I don't
Okay.
know the answer to that.
Very well. So Councilman O, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So, the trip to the UK, I understand 11 companies went on that trip. And the trip to Israel, 10 companies went on that trip. How were these companies notified about the trip?
We actually held an open house down at the Independence Visitor Center, sent out an extensive set of invitations to companies, and I want to come back to a point about the Goldman Sachs program because we made some specific requests into the companies that are in that program, and then invited people to submit sort of interest. And of course, they have to fund this themselves, so some of the interest is like, are you willing to pay up?
Right.
So we had proposals from people. They tried to explain to us why this trip was of value to them, how it might expand their business, and we made selections from there.
Okay.
But to come back to the point about the Goldman program, and I would invite any council member to come with us to one of these Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business events, both the start of the cohort, but also the graduation. These are really extraordinary. The mayor has said this many times. I've been to pretty much all of them as well. The power of this thing to help these companies get better networks and grow is phenomenal. And the companies that you see are from across the spectrum in Philadelphia. They're generally small companies, but they come from different ethnic groups. They come from male, female. It's really amazing.
It's a great program.
The kind of the poster child for this is a fellow named Michael Brown, who's got an engineering company that is growing immensely, and Michael will tell you that he was on both ends of that trip,
Right.
by the way, and he will tell you that the trip, the Goldman program, has really accelerated his growth curve. So It's very exciting.
Thank you. So when you did the public announcement, were you for the first time reaching out and receiving interest on these trade missions because there was no prior file or data or information?
Right.
So-
This was really the first bona fide trade mission.
Yes. And this being a new effort, there was not data or information from the prior administration or the administration before that from which to go on. Is that correct?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And now there is a director of international business investment within the business attraction and retention unit. Is that correct?
That's right, Shinju Cho.
Yes, and a relatively new position fulfilling these duties. In terms of the process of preparation, now that you have these businesses on board, they're interested in going, was this a first-time visit for them, or had there been a process of matching, identification of likely business, results? Was that done prior to the trip?
For most of them, this was first time for everybody,
Right.
including us.
Kind of introductory.
Yeah, now
Overseas.
several of them had already had some overseas connections and networking.
Yes.
And they, for all of them, but particularly for those ones that have previous connections, they see the association with a government-sponsored trade mission as an enhancement of their profile.
Okay, fantastic. In terms of the trips that were kind of a combination of mayor's conference plus trade mission, such as the trip to China, was that publicized? Were companies invited to go on that trade mission?
That we didn't really publicize it because the trip was really about an invite from the
Conference of Mayors?
And I'm blanking on the name, Paulson Institute at University of Chicago. It was really about that, and then we did not have the kind of time either to really assemble that because it was at relatively short notice from the Paulson Institute. So we were able to put together a couple of key elements, mostly institutional ones, university, orchestra, those kind of things where we knew we could make something happen in fairly short order. Back to your, I don't know if this is where your question was going, but takes a lot of effort to put these trips together, as you
Yes.
probably know.
Yes, and that is where my question is going, because it is a kind of a new effort, which we're very happy to see. So then the question is, a couple of kind of introductory trade missions, people getting out there, but the amount of work that's necessary, what is the budget for this effort? Is there a particular budget, or is it kind of just mixed in with commerce in general?
It's mixed in, and Ms. Cho, my chief of staff, Luke Butler, had to spend a pretty significant amount of time on just our general budget, getting these trips organized.
Okay.
Which is why, as much as I want to see them continue, and they will continue, I don't want to be doing this all the time. They take a lot of effort.
It takes a lot of effort. It sounds like that you are drawing staff in to do this
Yes, we
that
did.
otherwise would be handling other things. So that's my next question. Is there a particular staff devoted or particularly assigned to this outside of busy?
Well, the creation of this Office of International Investments with Ms. Cho was intended to alleviate some of that kind of spreading the load thin
Right.
around. At least
Okay.
it has now a focus that she is in charge of, as well as other duties related to our relationships with the Consular Corps and so on. So at least we can focus it in a dedicated staff member. But inevitably, any of these trips are always going to draw on other people because it just takes that kind of effort.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions, just other than to state to the council president that I am making a request for a total in terms of costs of the 6 overseas visits by the mayor, Brazil, China, the UK, Israel, Africa, and Rome.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Hearinng.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Before I start questioning every department, so I questioned, I started off with planning. Would that be the same for you, Deputy Mayor, about where you're located, square footage? Is that the same request that I've made of them earlier?
I'm sorry, just restate the request.
All right,
I'm blanking here.
all right, the question is where you're located. All right, is it a building that the city owns?
Oh, yeah,
Square
yeah.
footage, so is that the same? Does that apply for you as well?
You mean our own
Your
place?
own place?
Yeah, we're, in fact, this planning occupies most of the 13th floor, 1515 Arch, and Commerce occupies most of the 12th and some of the 13th.
Okay, so I will also provide with you a list of questions, the same questions.
Okay.
About, whether we own the space that you're in, how many people.
I'll get you that.
All right,
But
all the procurement questions.
Okay.
Do you
Just
know,
give
is
it to us, so-
per department or bulk for bulk purchase for everything that you
Sure.
oversee?
happy to answer them.
Okay, great.
We purchase very little.
All right, great. So now I got that out of the way. All right, so in the FY15 projections, it calls for an increase of $3 million in hotel tax revenues generated from the hotel tax. Is that the projected increase, taking in consideration the bookings for the convention center, the new construction from 1,000 new rooms, in the city of Philadelphia? Is this the projections based on the uptick of these types of occurrences, events, and construction?
I believe so, although I'll add that for us, this is a pure pass-through, so we don't do any interpretation of that money. We just
I didn't
pass
know.
it.
I didn't know from your perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the pass-through.
But I do think, yes, this is...
From
this is-
a commerce, economic
Yeah.
development, and
We're seeing an uptick in percentage of occupancy in hotels, not huge numbers, but some. And we're also seeing an uptick in what's called RevPAR, or the effective room rates that are out there. They're inching up. They're coming back to the higher levels that they were at before the recession. It certainly gives us some encouragement about
certainly
adding
does.
these additional rooms.
it certainly does. And over the, going into the third year, I can tell you, and, having to deal with the agencies prior to being here on this side of the rail in city council, elected by members of, people of the 6th district, I see a major difference in the way, the city's approaching business and dealing with, and the collaboration with PIDC and the multiple departments and intergovernmental type of cooperation. So I hope that continues.
It will.
And I've
Certainly as long as
witnessed
I'm
it.
here.
I've witnessed it, again, from this side of the rail, so I'm excited about that. The Class 500 obligations in the budget of $500,000 for the Delaware River waterfront cooperation. Can you explain what that is for? Is that a grant from the DEA, or is that?
That's general fund money to support their operation, to make sure that they continue to be viable as they are getting a lot of these projects underway.
Okay, and can you tell me the status? I don't need, the projected start dates on some of those?
Sure.
On that project with DRCC?
Yeah, I mean, simply put, there's probably, there's at least 6 or 7 riverfront projects that DRWC is in the process of doing by way of parks, pier restoration, trail works, and this is all predicated on getting these public space improvements done as a way to incentivize the private development around them. And then we are continuing to have what are now, I think, more advanced conversations with private developers who are seeing this and saying, okay, I think now it's time for me to get serious about this. And in one case, I won't go into names, but in one case, a major developer in town who's had one of the pier holdings for a long time and actually came to me a month or so ago and said, I think it's time to get serious about this pier, let's talk. So that was the goal, incentivize the private development, make a better public environment, make this whole thing more desirable. The OWC is managing all of those capital projects.
Managing with your oversight, your office oversight?
Coordination, yeah.
Coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the board of it. I actually have to spend a fair bit of time working on it.
There you go. On page 57, there's an item on your operating budget, community stakeholders. Can you explain that a little bit? Community stakeholders, and it's almost in FY15, 2.9 million.
Oh, okay. I'm just not even sure what page you're looking. Let me just take a look.
Page 57.
Yeah, okay. The 2.6 million. It's on page 57, section 18. Excuse us a second. Like what? Sorry, we're not conferring with lawyers. We're just trying to get it.
While you're fine, you
Yeah, just
can get back.
ask another one, we'll come back to it.
Absolutely. So, last year, we've had some conversation about our city's bond ratings and the rating of the bond and how it affects economic development. Now, the city's bond rating is approved, which is great news. Has it had any kind of measurable impact on our fiscal health?
It's always hard to draw cause, and it's a good question. It's hard to draw cause and effect between the two, direct cause and effect, but there's little question that when our bond rating goes up, two things happen. One is that at the practical level, we can borrow money more cheaply, and that allows us to just do more with the same amount of money. The other is, as our bond rating goes up, it is a signal to others, nationally and internationally, that this is a place to make a good investment. This is a good place for investment. And I guess if you want to sort of say, and again, I don't want to draw a direct cause and effect line to this, but I do think there's reality in it. In the previous 10 years, we scarcely saw an out-of-town developer with out-of-town money come into Philadelphia. And in the last several years, we've seen several of them come. And they include people like John Buck Company from Chicago, NREA, which I know you're familiar with from Washington, D.C., Jonathan Rose Company from New York. This kind of interest, and these are people who operate nationally and get to sort of pick where they want to invest, are seeing Philadelphia as a good investment. There's no question in my mind that an improved bond rating helps that story.
Yeah, so, and as we progress in our uptick here, I mean, hopefully, maybe we could pick up on some indicators, to show, but we are taking advantage. So we're taking advantage of this national, or this bond rating upgrade.
Oh, yeah.
Attracting nationals and promoting and, using the city
It's
reps.
always, that particular point, and obviously plenty of others, are always part of our story, particularly to out-of-town investors.
Commercial quarters. I put my district office on a commercial quarter, commercial quarter that is not bursting, and vibrant as some of the others, and I give them all the credit in the world because they do an awesome job in their models. But some of those models, you have to get to that point. So we, with the creation of the commercial quarter managers, I think is great. So I see firsthand what some of the city's issues facing, getting started and where we want to go. Do you, and you could provide this to the chair, have a list of current vacancy rate in our commercial quarters, and how do we currently compare to previous years or past years? In my opinion, I think we're improving. With all the investments that we're making, I think we are improving. But if you could just provide some of that, comparables and investments. That
We'll
we
give
made
you what
over
we
the
have. We have particular information on the 14 corridors that we have funding streams in. I don't know that we probably don't have as good information on all the ones we're not involved in, but I can get you the ones we are involved in.
Okay. All right. I will come back.
Thank you, Councilman. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. We're going to take a quick 5-10-minute break. The stenographer needs a brief break.
Don't leave. Got it.
Don't. Thank you. Hey, Joe. Thank you. Hey, folks, can we ask a little quiet, please? Thank you. All right, we're going to reconvene and go back to our testimony, and I believe that Councilman, you were finished, right? Yes, you were. You said you were going to come back. You're teed up here, sir. Have you teed up? Where's Councilwoman Bass? Did she leave? All right. So we have Councilwoman Blackwell, I believe, had not participated in this round. And then Councilwoman Brown, did you? After Blackwell? All right. And then we'll go to Councilman Kenny and then Councilman Hearinng. So, Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is an issue that we've all heard about by now, and that's the communication issues regarding Graduate Philadelphia and Campus Philly concerning their funding for the next fiscal year at the same level as they were in 2014 for $625,000. That whole issue, whether or not they would be receiving the increase they asked for, $325,000. Could you respond? Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you. We have been funding them at the level of $625,000 for several years. We committed to continue to do that. There was a request made, really less of Commerce and more of the administration in general, to increase that funding. For all reasons of priority building, that funding was not forthcoming, and so we don't have in Commerce the resources to increase that funding, which we told them that. If there's a way to bring more resources to this, we're happy to move the money, because we are the kind of pass-through agency for that. But we will and I think it sounds like you have the story right. We are committed to continuing to fund them at the level that we have been doing thus far.
All right, we certainly are making the request for an increase if that is possible, and we appreciate the sustained amount they have.
Yeah, and if it's possible, we're happy to blend that in and move it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask, Mr. President, to have Barbara Madelman come up and just provide on the record the reason for the increase and how it will be used. This is for additional operations, staff, etc. Just to have that added background.
I'm right here, don't breathe on me.
Thank you very much. I'm Barbara Madelman. I'm Executive Director of Graduate Philadelphia, and I'm with Deborah Diamond, who is the Director of Campus Philly. We have formed, between the two of us, the Talent Collaborative. So we have asked for the increase for several reasons. One is that we would like to do some joint research on not only comebackers, which is what Graduate Philadelphia works with, but also we could do more research about the work that Deborah does, which is working with current college students to get them engaged through internships and providing avenues for them to go to a cultural event so that they stay in Philadelphia. We also are looking to do some internships for adults. Through Campus Philly, they offer jobs and internships for college students, and we would like to do those for the adult comebackers who are completing their degree. Also, having additional funding will enable us to work with more adults. We currently have 4,000 adults that we're working with. 500 have graduated to date. 2,000 are in college. 1,500 are still in our pipeline. For an adult comebacker, it normally takes between 5 and 6 years for them to come back and complete their degree. So it's an enormous amount of touches that we have to do to get adults through.
Okay. All right, I have my own personal philosophy about research. I think higher education institutions should pay for research, and government is in the business of service. But that's my own personal 2 cents. Speak, if you would, to, you say we will leverage the dollars from higher eds and corporations. Discuss briefly, because I only have 5 minutes before the next round, what that means or what that looks like.
Councilwoman Blackwell, I'm the president of Campus Philly. So every dollar that is invested by the city, we leverage 2 additional dollars from the higher ed community. Campus Philly works with 31 colleges and universities that are paying partners. And we have a corporate membership program as well that has at least 20 corporate members who invest in Campus Philly, because ultimately they're the beneficiaries of our work, right? If we retain these college students, they're employed by these companies, and the companies need the talent. The primary reason for the additional funding is that we're working with our primary work is to connect students to internships, because internships are the sticky experience for them staying here after they graduate, and it's most needed by the business community here as well.
These would be paid internships or
These
no?
are typically paid internships,
Okay.
yes. We're working with an online platform that we inherited from Innovation Philadelphia in 2004 when we were created, and working with a 10-year platform to match students to internships is no longer viable. It's not we're working with it, but we need to change it in order to be able to grow the number of students who are getting internships and the number of companies who are posting with us, because we know this is our way to be most effective. So that's the primary reason. And in addition, working with 31 colleges and universities, and I know Graduate Philadelphia has a large number of college partners too, those networks can only grow if we have the staff to serve those partnerships. It takes a lot of work to serve students at all of those schools, and if we want to leverage more investment by higher eds, which we certainly do in the work that we're doing, because they benefit ultimately, we need the staff to be able to develop, to serve the students at those schools.
Okay. My recommendation, food for thought, is to have a conversation with Charmaine Matlock-Turner of the Greater Philadelphia Urban Affairs Coalition, which shares the similar mission, and look to see where there is opportunity for synergy, because the dollars are we know what they are. And so there's benefit in partnerships because of the new world that we live in. So I would urge you to at least have the conversation and see where that takes you.
Thank you.
Okay then. Mr. President, I'd like to focus back to the MBE, WBE. I had my staff pull, Ms. Angela Burton, what qualifies as, when you're looking at or adding the numbers around MBE, WBE, and according to what I've had pulled, you count minority women as minority, not as WBE. Is that accurate?
That's correct, depending on the transaction, okay? And this is what I mean by that. A minority woman can be on one transaction as a minority. If she is on another project, she can be identified as a woman-owned business. It depends on which group of compliance the prime contractor is pursuing. So if he needs a woman, he could hire her. If he needs a minority, he could also hire her. But two different projects so that they're not double counted in any transaction. So that's one thing. When you look at how we count our numbers for participation by ethnic group and gender,
Okay.
we count minority women under that ethnic group or minority. So African American businesses will include men and